Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and thank you for listening to the Weekly Wake Up, where we set off the alarm on what's really happening in our country. But after another crazy week, we still don't know. I suppose we do know there's an election, but anyway, we'll come to that in a moment. Today we're going to talk about housing, or rather homes, and how we can ensure that we all have one. And I'm joined today by Satya. How are you doing, Satya?
Hi, Tom. I'm good, thank you. Glad to be here again.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. You've got plenty of things to say. And you've got the biscuits in front of you, so that's really good. And it's good to have you here. And, of course, we've got Janine. How are you doing,
Tom.
Janine?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. You've got a few things to say too, have you?
Yes, I do.
Well, then let's get on with it. Hey, but what we're going to talk about first. So I understand there's going to be a general election. Well, what do we think about that?
It's rubbish, I say.
It's going to change the texture of Christmas, I think. Well, it depends how you vote, how happy your Christmas is going to be.
So what do we think the outcome is going to be then?
I tell you what, if I knew that, I'd be a very rich woman.
I thought you were.
I think clearly, the issue is going to be Brexit, and it will I think, sadly, eclipse a lot of the other issues that we need to be talking about, and the things that real agenda is about, which is the state of our country as it is, and our communities, and the distribution of wealth and living conditions, and our general well-being. And unfortunately, I think that will be so eclipsed by the Brexit decisions.
We think that it's all about Brexit, but I think this election is so much more than Brexit. This election is broader and deeper and will have consequences for all of us for generations to come. I just think going forward into this election, all of us really need to really think about what sort of society we want, because the outcome of this election could decide that and define our society for generations.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, and it should be about all of these things. I'm just concerned that it won't be, and I hope I'm wrong, because, as you say, those are the things that should be non-political in a way. Isn't that an ideology and almost like a constitution into what we think are valuable in our society, above politics of what we wish to achieve and how people live and work and play?
Yeah, well, interestingly, I think the politicians will want it to be about Brexit, particularly some parties will want it because that plays to their strengths. But I think as in 2017, what happened there was, although everybody wanted the election to be about Brexit, the people chose differently. And actually, Labour did really, really well when everybody thought Labour wasn't going to do very well. I don't know what's going to happen in this election, but I think the election should be up to the people. That's about democracy. It's about people choosing what they want, not about being pushed into something because of what the politicians want.
I think the thing with parties, I mean, one of the, talking about outcomes, Sir John Curtis, who seems to know a lot about these things and is often featured on the broadcast media, reckoned that it was actually going to see a big reduction in seats for the main two parties, and a lot of the smaller parties would actually get a lot more. And in that case, it looks less like a majority for anybody for that matter. And so this would actually could be a positive move. It could be frustrating, but it could be a positive move because it's a break-up of the tribalism that in politics which seems to have destroyed what we're trying to do. It's actually seeing a change in that. But as you rightly say, it's not about the parties. It's about what sort of society we want, and fixing. The frustrating thing I find is, they're talking about, we've got to get Brexit done and then we get onto the domestic agenda. There's a couple of concerns there. Yes, they should be doing the domestic agenda now. What is the domestic agenda? It's solving these real issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's all interrelated, because the outcome, whichever way it is, if I'm going to have to say it, if the Tories have their way, they get elected, they want to do Brexit and they want a hard Brexit, where is that going to leave us as a country and as a society? Are they going to continue with austerity? Are they going to continue with having most things really for the rich and less for the poor? Is that the kind of society we want? Or do we want something different?
Well, we want something different.
And most people do. Most people want a house to live in. Most people want a job that pays them a good wage so that they can provide for their families. They want some money to do something nice and social with. They want to have, young people want an education without being saddled with a load of debt. All these things, that's what real people actually want.
It's wanting a better life, and we don't see much initiative from the government.
I just hope that it doesn't become just, again, a personality contest. Go back, we've seen the last few weeks of a very divisive and destructive language, and at a cost of any real detail or substance of ideology being expressed at all.
And the Conservatives, and they put stuff online, they're attacking Jeremy Corbyn, so they've been attacking him and saying, well, he's, our role is to keep him out. Differently, you've got the Liberal Democrats, talking about how they were going to fight to keep these people out. Likewise, we've got the Labour Party trying to keep the Tories. So it's all this keeping people out rather than actually doing stuff for the real people of the country. And it's quite staggering, really, that we don't see, but so little focuses on the millions of people who are having a really hard time, and it's something that can be done.
One of the actions I would say to our listeners here is really, really think about this. It's up to us individually who we vote for, who we want to be leading us. Just think about it from a different perspective. Is what kind of society? That's our starting point. What kind of society do we want, and who is best placed to provide that for us in the way that we want it?
It's actually the character of the candidate. So, not so much the party. Look at the character of the candidate and their record and the way that they do things, because we want a parliament that's made up with people that will have integrity, understand the needs of the people, rather than they're just beholden to the party. I'm Labour, I'm Conservative, therefore I will do this.
I think that's one thing that I do recommend doing, is to check on people that you're interested in or MPs you're interested in, and you can easily go to their voting record and you can see exactly how they vote. That's what I always do, is look at how they voted. And it can actually be very surprising, because it's either at odds to what they've actually just said. It's a very good barometer of actually their political leaning, but where their values are focused and their social conscience is. So I do recommend that people to look at those, because they might be surprising.
But as you said, it's what sort of society do we want? We've got to focus. To us here, it's about the real agenda.
Because I think people are really, really fed up. And lots of people saying, oh, I can't be bothered. I'm fed up of this. I don't want to even talk about it. I don't want to know about it. I don't care about it. But actually, let's see this as an opportunity. Let's see this actually. Each individual vote can make a difference. And, it's our duty to do something and have our voice heard.
It is. It's so important to vote. I think that's
absolutely important to
we
vote.
think our vote is not important, but that's the basic right that we've got. Anyway, probably done enough election coverage for today. We could go on, but we might go on. We go around in circles, probably.
I think it's going to be a very, very interesting and tough campaign.
But we wanted this week to talk about poverty, lack of housing, and look at maybe what some of the answers are. Janine, you were going to kick off with some facts and things that you'd sort of picked up and some thoughts.
Yes, I mean, following on from that conversation, what might determine our vote is actually to look historically. It's the legacy of government policy about austerity and the impact of that. And the figures here from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, £78 billion were spent on the legacy of austerity. And by that they mean on the implications on increased crime, problems with schools, free school meals, policing. And clearly, austerity has affected the poorest in our society, and particularly in the north geographically. And as the legacy of that, that's a huge amount of money to be spending to counter a policy that is supposed to be saving money. And perhaps it's worth looking at different ways of doing that and one of those fundamental, I believe fundamental rights of a human being is a home. It's also the best thing for society that we have our own homes and we create communities, and it helps our well-being.
So apart from the compassionate point of view of obviously wanting to solve poverty or stop austerity, what we're saying there is it actually makes financial sense for the whole of us. And I know this is the same with the housing side of it, because Crisis's figure, I think, it's something like 19 billion to solve homelessness completely, and will bring 56 billion in financial benefits, because more people have got jobs, more people have got houses, they get their act together, they get jobs, and they contribute to the economy. But of course, we're also looking at this from a compassionate point of view, because the recent government has destroyed the lives of so many people.
But I think that's an extraordinary figure you've quoted, because it just
amazing,
seems,
isn't it?
Yeah, it just seems illogical that this discrepancy in funding, the one that can completely counter each other, and the viability of doing that is so much more sensible, and let alone compassion. I often say this, even you don't believe in compassion, these things are actually economically viable and more sensible to put money into the poor communities.
Yeah, it's so interesting that, when we talk to politicians or people within that arena, they think that compassion is a soft thing. Compassion is about weakness. But compassion actually, as far as I know, as far as I understand, and as far as my experience has showed me, is that compassion is a real strength. Compassion and kindness are the greatest strength that we have as human beings. If we can set up our societies from a compassionate point of view, then actually we would be stronger and better societies all round.
Some information came in today from the organisation Compassion in Politics, and they're about to launch, in conjunction with Taxpayers Against Poverty, a campaign and the hashtag is Stop the Nastiness. And the campaign will ask all candidates in the election to make the pledge, and it's similar to the one that they launched with More United the other day, where 100 MPs have signed up to act with respect and kindness in their public life. And so this will be looking to continue that during the election. So they're looking for other organisations and people to support this to actually make that happen. Once again, we say that this is crazy that we have to do this, but I think if we keep drumming this in, that actually compassion, as you said, is strength, it's a positive thing. Let's think about what it is really like for other people, and we might make some progress.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to actually say be compassionate. Yeah. This is a prescriptive thing, but I mean, we know in schools now there are actually kids signing a contract to behave in a certain way, and actually how they adhere to that, and they see the value in doing that. We'd like to think that was an innate thing, but if it's not, then let's refine it. Another suggestion of where we lack compassion, or how it's impacting, going back to housing. We've got a figure of that 8% of public sector workers can only work in 8% of towns. That seems strikingly ludicrous to me, and again illogical and uneconomic.
Because they can't afford housing.
They can't afford, yes. So you've got your nurses and your fire and police people who can't afford to live there. It's not motivational to get people into those most valuable professions of our society, and to make it safe and healthy. But also it's exploitative because they're not being paid enough, and they're being manipulated in terms of it becomes a vocational profession.
Well, it's crazy when you see nurses and firefighters actually having to go and use food banks, for example. Absolute indictment on our society that those people, the very people who are there to help others, are having to do that we cannot look after them to help them to do a good job for us. It's kind of a vicious circle.
And it's a political mindset that's happening, and there's a clip circulating online with an interview, I think it was a Victoria Derbyshire show, with Ken Loach, the director of the new film Sorry We Missed You, which is a horrific tale of low-income families. But there was a Conservative councillor, and I don't have this in front of me, and there was someone that was either homeless or had been homeless, and he said something like the council didn't owe you anything. So there's this feeling that we don't actually owe to other members of society this compassion, if you like, to actually do something. But it is our moral responsibility to other members of society.
Absolutely. But my
to do that.
View has always been, governments say, we don't want to have big government, and we don't want to get involved in business, and we don't want to get involved in how much companies pay their people and that sort of thing. I say it's absolutely the government's role to do that. If different businesses do not pay their people properly, the government has to make sure that they do that. It's absolutely
it's
their
the rules
responsibility.
Of the game, really. It's like to be likened to a football match where you've got to have regulations, otherwise the whole thing goes
exactly.
into
But what
chaos.
happened with that was exactly the same thing that happened with the banking crisis, is because it was a lack of regulations. We decided not to regulate less, and so what happened is it all crashed.
Obviously, this is a key issue that we'll come on to looking at some of the answers and the action in a moment. Did you want to mention about affordable housing, or you were?
Well, I hate to say, it seems a bit of a misnomer, really. It's as I've discovered just in the research we've been doing and discussing earlier, that it's quite a complex issue in terms of what is affordable social housing and what the levies or the thresholds are in order to achieve housing affordable housing status. But one thing that you can see from all the reports and the independent stats and things that it is affordable to very, very few. That certainly, in order to get on some of the housing ladder, whether to buy and in the rent situation, the collective income of a household to be able to buy or have the rent is well above. You have to be earning well above the national average. So then that becomes a completely catch-22. So I mean, even if there's some figures that joint income has to be around 60,000. So I'm not quite sure how that's also going to work. And again, why is it a reasonable, sensible thing to do is preclude people from having a home, so that they can then be able to live their lives well and contribute and work and then contribute to tax.
Let's move on then to looking at some of the answers. I personally found it very disappointing with all the major parties and how they tackle some of these issues. And what we've said, really, what we're talking about here, these basic things, like key element of that is a lack of sufficient income and the lack of housing. What do we do? And it's not about just doing piecemeal interventions, sort of papering over the cracks. We need to get to the heart of the matter. A lot of it is about the sort of mindset and the political will. So what can we do? There are a few things here that we would like to see our politicians do, and some of these can be done, or our government can be done more or less on day one. And one thing that would make a big difference to 5 million people is to increase the minimum wage, which is not enough, and it's well below what's needed to live off. Real living wages from the Living Wage Foundation is based on council house rent, social housing rents. Well, a lot of people can't do that. It's not availability. Therefore, even the living wage is not enough if you're in the private sector. So that needs to increase sufficiently. Now, one of the things of doing this, and talking about the economic arguments, is if we increase wages, we're actually reducing the welfare budget because people are not requiring so much welfare. So really, what we're doing by increasing wages, we're taking some of that out of company profits and we're reducing the welfare budget. So that seems to make sense. What do you think of that one?
If I were to just say that, I know it might be a utopian proposition. I think if we as a society decided that there should be a level of income that everyone had, which would be for a good life, so people can have a home to live in, they can have enough money to support their families, buy food, clothes, do their social stuff, everything, get a good education. They had a ceiling to say, this is the amount of money that we need for all of our very basic needs. And regardless of who was in power at the time, that was in our constitution and it had to happen. I think that would be a great idea and it would make for a great society.
We've got the Living Wage Week coming up, and not next week, the week after. So look out for that because there'll be a lot more being talked about. It's
interesting what Satya just said in terms of to depoliticise and actually maybe come up with a manifesto for us as a society outside political boundaries. That is actually what is every person's right to have. Then decisions are based around that. It's clearly, when you read the figures, where it's costs us more to have more people in poverty and all the implications of it, and that also the other problems is that once, as we discussed last week, so forth, is that once you get into poverty, it is a spiral. It's impossible to get out of it. So people become trapped.
When we have a society where everybody has enough for their basic needs, then actually it makes for a happier society all over for everyone. Everyone feels better because I know that there are people who are wealthy who don't feel good about it because there are people who are very, very poor. And actually, individually, they can't do anything about it. But as a collective, we can do something about it.
I just wanted to mention that the Living Wage Week is the 11th to the 17th of November. Now, the other thing that could be done, we're talking about these issues, is that we change the council tax system. Now, ideally, I'd like to see a land value tax, and we won't go into that now, but if we increase the council tax bands so the bigger properties are paying more, it's 25 years out of date, and also the people at the bottom end weren't paying, and also that tenants did not pay the council tax. That's the way it used to be with property taxes. So that would relieve, 30% of households would not be paying the council tax, but we'd recoup that and more from the much more expensive properties, where people do have the resource to contribute more, and that's what should happen. Instead, we're making it worse for everybody and making life really difficult and contributing to homelessness because people cannot afford to pay it.
We've also generated, maybe it's because we feel disenfranchised, that we have generated a sort of individualistic, narcissistic society and materialistic, and that's again something that has to change. And I hope that's why the next election will talk more about ideologies and how people are living and what is the best way for a country to live and what do we believe in. Britain. I mean, I have one fact that just came to my mind actually about what Satya just said, that the Charity Commission the other day just did a survey on how much were given by certain proportions of society, and it's interesting that people earning over 250,000 gave around just over 1% of their annual income to charity, where the people under 50,000 were giving just over 3%. And I really thought about that for a lot. What does that mean? Rather than just saying all rich people are not very kind. What is it? Okay, what is it that actually people who want to earn a lot of money are driven to earn a lot of money? What is it that makes them feel not wanting to be philanthropic or to have a sense of responsibility or give back to society, that those who haven't been so fortunate? I think that's also another big issue, is about what is it about our...
Also, I think what would be good for the nation is there's some sort of, I mean, we talked about compassion, but there's some sort of projects that people will feel good about. So if minimum wage is going up, or do you know we actually are building 250,000 council houses? Or, the council, I'm not going to have to pay council tax anymore because I'm renting. Hooray! These sort of initiatives would actually have a positive effect, and they actually do not cost the rest of taxpayers anything else. Other thing that we could be doing is also that we could be reducing income taxes. It's crazy that, you earn 12 grand and which is below the minimum wage, and you've got to start paying income taxes. You already don't have enough to live off, so why do income taxes? That would not make a big difference to the income tax budget, but it would make a lot of difference.
To the individuals, it makes a huge difference.
And rent control is another thing. We have to have that. We've got crazy situation with rent, and we need to bring that's about the rules of the game. It's not forcing people. It's just saying these are the rules and you can't be doing that. So there's several things there that I would consider, sort of day one things that could be done. Apart from stopping Brexit, which is what...
Well, going full circle to what we were saying at the beginning in elections, and actually how actually what you were saying, Tom, about don't let them in, or they don't going to do this, or they're going to... It's all about negative messaging and not talking about what are the positive things. And I think that gets spread to the media, and there's a certain sense of schadenfreude, and it's self-perpetuated and salacious and precarious. But the fact is there are some fantastic things going on, or also how you close something. If you say, look, this is going to do, like the figure you said then, if this is, we do this amount and it's actually going to affect you very little, or 5p in the pound for you earning this much, make it very, very real. And actually, and again, with lots of things we don't discuss in government at the moment, or Parliament, is actually the detail. And the detail, it's not, and some of which is actually very good, or some of which isn't. But we are not making decisions on knowledge.
They're definitely not going to discuss the detail during election time, are they?
And of course, we could build more homes, and there's ways of doing that as well, because as we've said on this programme before, and reminding people, the cost of 70% of the cost of a home is the land. And if you can take the cost of land out by building homes on publicly owned land, it would make homes a lot cheaper. There's a lot more information on things like that on websites like taxpayersagainstpoverty.org. That's what can be done. But let's look, before we finish today, on what action we could take. Kick us off on that.
There's lots of things that we can all do, just talking about these issues to our friends, because actually the more people that go out there and talk about it and say, these are the things that government can do. These are the things that are easy to do. We want you to have the political will to do it. So going out there, talking to your politicians, talking to your friends, just raising awareness about these things would be, one of the actions.
What's the number one thing people can do? What can everybody do? Vote. That's it. Vote.
I've got that on my list.
Oh, okay.
Vote. I was coming to that, Tom.
Okay, well, I'm just jumping ahead of you. Vote and register for vote, because there's still a chance to be able to register if you haven't got it. And I mean, it has got, particularly as they've said in the last few years, there's a lot more younger people come on, and this could swing the whole thing if we get younger people to register and make sure that they actually vote.
I think awareness has been raised a lot in the last 3 years around Brexit, and also through the stuff around climate change, and both those things are really important to young people. So I'm hoping and praying that more young people will really say, okay, my vote will count, I am going to go out there and do this.
Well, actually, last local elections, which were largely about Brexit, had to have one of the highest turnouts ever. So when it is quite as contentious as this and quite as polarised, it tends historically to bring out the most amount of people. Although I'm always surprised that still falls but it's under 65%, which still is a huge amount of the population not voting. And I'd hate to think it's just because they can't be bothered or because they feel so disenfranchised, in which case I wish that the voting form had I abstain. So it just shows people have gone in
and make it a public holiday, maybe.
Well, yes, but actually to say I've come in here and it's not because I've said I actually don't believe any of you, rather than it just looked like people aren't caring at all.
Only if that's a tactical way of doing it. But actually, what we need is people to think about, what do you want? Yes, if young people feel disenfranchised, here is your opportunity to change it. Use your vote to change it.
And also don't blindly vote for the party, in my view. I think
exactly.
We will pass that. Look at the candidate, look at what they've done, their background, their history, look at their record and background. And I think it's going to be more about the people, because that's where it comes in with the attributes we're talking about, not blindly following the party, whichever one that is.
Vote for the kind of society that you want and the kind of people you want running it.
Apart from registering for voting, looking at the candidates, talking to your friends, and talking to politicians and actually lobbying these politicians as well. Join a campaigning group.
Get involved.
Rather than that, they would prefer to help out. And so that's also a good thing. Helping out the most vulnerable in society and doing your little bit. That suits some people better than out there campaigning.
Some people go and help out on food banks. Some people go and helping out in shelters, particularly at this time of year when there are a lot of vulnerable people out on the streets, lots of vulnerable people who need help and volunteers to come and do that. Some people have great skills that actually they can use to help people who would not otherwise be able to afford to get something that you can provide for them.
We've got through quite a few topics this week. We could go on. We realise the critical time we've got now with an election coming up. So that's the show for this week, and let's get out there and make change happen. Anyway, if you want to find out more about what we're up to and more about the Real Agenda, you can contact us at info@realagenda.org, because we'd love to hear from you. Give us a review, sign up for our mailing list, listen to the show and tell your friends. So what's up next on the Real Agenda? Well, listen next week. You've got the weekly wake up, and we've got another in our series of podcasts from Taxpayers Against Poverty called Hungry, Homeless, Powerless. So watch out for that, and that'll be coming up soon, and we'll be back next week with the weekly wake up. So a special thanks to our sponsors, Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. So thanks, team.
Thanks, Tom.
Time to say goodbye to everybody.
Yeah.
We can't keep talking all day. Thanks, Satya. Thanks, Janine.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tom.
Thank you. Make change,
don't
everybody.
Thank me. Just thank everybody for listening. It's so nice. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you for listening, and do listen again.
Indeed. Send us a note and pop in, and we're always looking for more people to join the team. One thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for the people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. And there's an election, so do something about it. That's The Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.